throw it up one time, let it show. This for the 806er. Hands up all of these. Ain't from the bottom, now we bigger. Say it from the government level. This for the 806er. Stand so tall in the picture. Real ones for that scripture. If you ride for the set, yeah. 806er.
Hey man, say man, what's the play, man? We're here for another special interview of the 806er one-on-one interviews, and we have a very, very special guest tonight. Not tonight, but this morning. I don't know when this interview will come out, but today we're joined by Abraham Enriquez, the Republican candidate for the Texas Congressional District 19. Many of you have seen him on the 806er, and I want to thank you for coming in.
Well, no, I should be thanking you. You know, as someone that believes in the going away of traditional media and speaking right to the community, your platform. This is a make it or break it. I think every candidate that's running for office, regardless of party, should be making a stop here with you. So the honor's mine, and I appreciate you.
I appreciate it. So before we even jump off, one thing I do want to say is that I always appreciated your eloquence. I love the way that you speak. You know what I'm saying? Especially because I'm older than you. So it's like I sit back and I watch your oration skills, and I'm in admiration about it. So just want to tell you that to your face.
You know, let's talk about that for just a quick second, because in campaigning, I see a lot of young people that are joining and saying, "Hey, this is the American dream walking in Lubbock," and I want to emphasize that. And for those that don't know my story, you know, my mom, she had me when she was 15 from a very devastating incident in her life, and she chose life, and I'm here today. At the same time, you know, when she was finishing up school, had juggling 3-4 jobs at a time, I think, you know, I was raised with grandma, grandpa, who were learning English at the time because my grandparents came as migrant farm workers. And so I was raised in a Spanish-speaking home. And I, went to Parsons Elementary. I'm a proud Parsons pirate. And I started my elementary career knowing very, very broken English, Spanish, predominantly my first language. It was my public school teachers here in Lubbock that taught me how to speak. That, in fact, I was a little behind on the reading skills in first grade. And I remember Miss Ballinger, I'll never forget her. She took me aside and she saw I was having a little bit of trouble on the school playground. And she said, you have a superpower. And she read me a comic book, and I think it was like Spider-Man or something. She's like, just like Spider-Man, you have your superpower. Your superpower is, 2 languages. We just got to strengthen the other part first. And I went from being a little bit delayed in reading and writing in first grade to winning the all-out spelling bee, being the spelling bee champ, my 5th grade Parsons Pirate tournament. And I'm very proud of that accomplishment. I think that accomplishment's the most proud I've ever been. So thank you. Hearing that from you, I appreciate that.
I appreciate it. So this conversation is because of the voters. They asked for this, so we're helping them to make that decision. The goal of today is not to endorse anyone, but the goal is to ask fair questions, serious questions about experience, policy, leadership, and what West Texas realistically expects from you if you get sent to Washington. So before we start, I want the audience to know that this interview is meant to be direct but fair, but we're going to give you a space to answer anything and everything as well. Okay, so first off, Abraham, for the voters who are just now paying close attention, tell them who you are and why you're running and why this race matters to West Texas.
Yeah, who I am. Born and raised right here in Lubbock, Texas, a graduate of Abilene Christian University. This community really has been home my entire life. And from right here, I have seen the American dream be prosperous, be something that you can lean on. I mean, listen, my grandparents, I said a little earlier, they came in the early 70s under the Braceros program that President Reagan, a Republican, initiated. And right here, they were picking grapes, cantaloupes, onions, cotton. And 2 generations later, their grandson is now right in front of you, running on the Republican primary runoff for Congressional District 19. And that is the American dream that's alive in our district. That's the American dream that I want to fight to protect. So that's who I am. Born and raised native West Texan, fighting for the American dream, for the next generation of West Texans. And if I can do this with all the punches that it comes, what does that say about the next generation, what that they can achieve right here at home?
Very true. So you're asking voters to send you to Congress. You built a name through conservative outreach and activism, but you haven't held elective office before. Why should voters trust you with the federal seat right now instead of choosing someone with a little bit more direct influence in Washington, agriculture, and legislative experience?
Yeah, so I think this becomes a question of inside versus outside. And for years, for decades, we have seen what happens when we send people who are inside the political machine. We get the same failed policies over and over again. And our president, our incredible president who has lowered inflation, has secured the border, has provided prosperity to be unleashed all across the country, didn't have any federal or any elected experience before. And yet he is one of the greatest presidents of our lifetime. I think sometimes it takes someone who doesn't understand the mechanics of DC. In fact, I feel like we shouldn't be sending people who understand the mechanics of DC to go out there and make some change. However, experience matters. And if I were someone who had no political or policy experience, I would not be running for this kind of seat. But I think I have the best experience because I'm the only candidate that is a partner to not one, but two Trump administrations, White House administrations. In fact, a couple weeks ago, a lady by the name of Brett Powell, who is special assistant to the president and director of the Office of Public Liaison of the White House, came all the way to Abilene and campaigned with me. And she said, when President Trump needed the help in some of the most tough battles, most difficult battles, the White House always knew to call Abraham. Because as a partner to the Domestic Policy Council of the White House for two administrations, I helped pass over a dozen pieces of legislation. She said it herself. When President Trump wanted to renegotiate NAFTA to what is now USMCA to keep American jobs here, I was at the table. When President Trump wanted to cut back on regulations for small businesses to be able to prosper, I was there to help expand the Regulatory Flexibility Act. When President Trump wanted to ensure that there was no tax on tips for our servers, I was there to help get the One Big Beautiful Bill across the finish line. And most recently, which I think hits so close to home, when the Office of the First Lady wanted some support with the Take It Down Act, which protects people online from harassment and slander, I was there to help get that piece of legislation across the finish line. So on policy, we've been doing that. In fact, my policy journey starts with a visiting fellow of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, an organization that is the most effective organization in policy, started by now Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins. Then I became a visiting fellow to the America First Policy Institute, another national organization that Secretary Brooke Rollins started as well. So for the past decade or so, my biggest policy advisor has been the sitting Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins. And I think it just doesn't get better than that. My opponent, a Washington-based lobbyist, for those of you that don't know what a lobbyist is, tell us
what is a lobbyist.
Yeah, a lobbyist is basically someone who does the bidding of the highest seller, right? So he takes whoever gives him the most money to put policies that make sense the most to them. So if you're a small independent person that doesn't have $1 million budget for lobbying fees, you're basically cut out of that policy conversation. It's the reason why this president doesn't deal with consultants and lobbyings. He deals with direct community leaders. And as a registered lobbyist, you can only speak to a member of Congress for no more than 5 minutes. We have the direct access to the highest policy leaders in the country. In fact, Secretary Rollins, while she can't endorse, what does it say that her mother, Representative Helen Kerwin, endorsed this campaign, making me one of the only candidates that she has supported? That says something for West Texas. And I believe that that's the reason why we have a base that's so strong, because West Texas finally has a seat at the table that we haven't had in over a couple of decades.
Can you give us one example from your life where you had to deliver real life results for people who did not already agree with you?
Oh man, I mean, I look back at 2020. We were at the height of the pandemic, and there was a lot of conversation about how are we going to reopen up our businesses? How are we going to reopen up our schools? More specifically, our schools. There was such a strong push of keeping children in their homes, behind masks, and behind a digital screen.
Do you mean nationally or
locally? Nationally.
Wow.
And I was having conversations with the White House, and it was very evident that the president did not like the idea of keeping children home, because of the long-term effects of delayed education and delayed social skills. More importantly, this was going to change the very way we did schools. As a byproduct of our public school systems here in West Texas, I'm proud to say that we have some of the best schools in all of the country with the best teachers. And when you keep children outside of socializing from each other, and when you keep children out of the classrooms and behind a digital screen, we are raising a nation that will fail. And so there was this really strong push of people that didn't want to bring children back because, I do believe there was big education lobbying involved. But more importantly, people were just scared, right? And so the president, called his cabinet. It was him, the vice president, the secretary of education, and Kellyanne Conway, the chief counselor to the White House. And they said, we want advice on how to reopen schools. And what I did was I spoke to teachers from all different backgrounds, political backgrounds here in West Texas. And what I have found is that we had the best plan to reopen our schools. And what we did was we pushed a teacher right here from West Texas, my friend Claudia, to go all the way to the White House. And what we thought was going to be a one-on-one with the president's staff was a one-on-one conversation with himself, the president himself, the vice president, the secretary of education, and Kellyanne Conway. And on national TV, you can still find the clip. She was telling him, this is what has worked for West Texas and rural education. And we believe this is the best step for the nation. And from that conversation, the president writes an executive order, and schools were open again because of how we do things here in West Texas. And I think today we're still living on those policies that brought children back to school and strengthened our education system. And that was an area where I took a back seat, and I let someone from West Texas take the front seat. And I think we're all better for it.
So a big part of your public record is your work with Bienvenido, right?
Yeah.
You described it as a major conservative Hispanic outreach organization.
Yeah.
When you say Bienvenido helped grow the Republican support among Hispanic voters, what does that mean in measurable terms?
Yeah, so Bienvenido, for those of your listeners that don't know, started kind of as a hobby, as a passion project. In 2018, when I graduated from Abilene Christian University, I came back to Lubbock because I was going to start law school in the fall of 2018. And in that summer break, I met a man by the name of Charlie Kirk at a dinner in Midland, Odessa. And I'd been trying for years to get a hold of Charlie because I was very passionate about what he was doing. And I just wanted to meet him. And I was promised a 5-minute conversation if I could get to Midland, Odessa by that evening. You better believe I sped all the way from Lubbock to Midland, Odessa. And what was supposed to be a 5-minute conversation turned into a 2-hour-long dinner with Charlie. And my whole passion was, Charlie, I want to bring more Hispanics into the Republican Party, specifically into Turning Point. And he said, I don't want you to play a part in Turning Point. I want you to be our Hispanic arm, our Hispanic outreach arm. And he said, what is a Spanish word for welcome? Like welcoming people into our side. I said, Bienvenido. It quite literally means welcome in Spanish. And he said, okay, name it Bienvenido USA, and you will be the Hispanic arm of Turning Point USA. And for that rest of that year, he gave me the blueprint of how to do grassroots work. And he fast forwarded 10 years of trial and error. And what I have found is when you go to churches, when you go to local small businesses, and you just tell them about the issues that matter, where we stand on pro-life, where we stand on individual liberty, where we stand on safety and security, more often than not, people will register as Republicans when they find about the issues, not about the people on the ballot. And we had these record number of voter registration drives, which I became a partner, an affiliate partner to the Republican National Committee, right? That track every single voter registration that we were doing. Because of that work, that led me to be the RNC's Rising Star of the Year because of the number of voter registrations and voter conversions to the Republican Party that they were seeing. And I think that's the reason why the RNC committee man and the RNC committee woman, so for those that don't know, the RNC, the National Republican Party, each state has one man and one woman that represents the state to the Republican Party. And they typically stay out of campaigns. They don't endorse. They let the Republican primary hash out the way it does. But yet they know the work that I've done, and they've endorsed this campaign. Why? Because when I say we've brought in over 1 million new Republican voters over the past 7 years, that's not just some number made up. That is trackable, and that is why the RNC is named the RNC Rising Star of the Year. And that's why the RNC committee man and committee woman know the work that we've done on paper, registered on paper, and have endorsed this campaign.
Okay, so you made your support for President Trump a major part of your campaign. A lot of Republicans like that, some don't. But here's a harder question. Mm-hmm. If President Trump or the Republican leadership supported something that you believe would hurt West Texas farmers, oil workers, or small businesses, would you publicly push back?
Listen, I think the question here is, how much do we love America? And President Trump, since day one, has proven to be a person that is willing to give his life. Think about that. 3 assassination attempts, 99 federal bogus cases on him. If any of us were to have gone through that, I think we would have dropped out immediately out of politics, especially if we had a life that didn't depend on politics. And yet he is making decisions that in every step of the way have strengthened the United States. And I've learned, being a partner to the White House, that while maybe something doesn't make sense today, in the long term, it's strengthening America. So as of today, President Trump has not done anything that caused me worry about the direction of our country. In fact, I am strengthened in my resolve and my confidence in the leader of the Oval Office. My opponent, on the other hand, the day that President Trump was indicted in Miami, went on a podcast. He tried to distance himself from the president, and in fact called every Republican voter that stands with the president a threat, a far-right radical Republican. That's what's at stake here. You have a man that has given his entire life, has gone through assassination attempts, has gone through the politically charged Department of Justice, and still stands for every single one of us. My question isn't if he loves America or not. I think he's proven that. My question is, do we have fighters in DC that are willing to fight with him to put policies on the table that are actually betterment for every America? And that's what I think this election is about.
So when I was reading the comment section on the way in, I was skimming and seeing what's going through. I seen somebody say to the effect that they're both candidates are fighting to be the most Trump-like candidate, so that's why they both won't get my vote. What would you say to somebody that feels that way?
So I would say we are running in the Republican primary, right? Meaning the Republican Party of West Texas is deciding right now who is their best fighter that's going to go into the November election and hash it out at the ballot box with the best fighter on the Democrat side. Right now, the leader of the Republican Party is the president of the United States, the highest, most influential, most powerful leader in the world. If you are vying for the Republican nomination, it only makes sense to stand with the leader of your party, right? But also, I think it's important to note that being a Republican nominee means that you're able to bring in a coalition of voters that maybe don't see eye to eye with you on 99% of issues, but on one issue that they do. So to the people that have a problem with our president, I would say I stand with the president simply because I know his heart and I know the vision that he has for America. This is not someone that I just see on TV doing press conferences. This is someone that I have sat in multiple roundtables. I've seen him draft multiple policies that are based on not the consulting and lobbying class in DC, but based on the community. But what I also say is that I'm excited for the future of the Republican Party. You know, we have a shot at deciding what the party looks like for the next generation to come. And so for our party to be good, we need everyone in. So those that maybe don't agree with the president, I say you still need to be involved, because when good people are on the outside, bad people shape policy. And that's what sometimes we get bad policy based out of. So stay in the fight. We need you.
So the other day, it was a border policy day, right? Who came to visit you?
The president of the National Border Patrol Council, Paul Perez.
Okay, so you said one of your top priorities is making President Trump's policies permanent.
Mm-hmm.
How would you measure success after 1 year? Fewer crossings, more deportations, more border patrol agents, more prosecutions? Be specific.
I think one of the main things is just a law that is on the books. I would say right now, one word that I want everyone to engrave in their heart and in their mind is remember. Remember a time under the last administration where we had a wide open border, that we had a record number of human trafficking coming across our border, a record number of fentanyl coming across our border, a record number of people on the U.S. terrorist watch list. Think about that. We have over 300 people that are on the U.S. terrorist watch list that crossed over our border and are in the United States today. How do I measure success? Is ensuring that we have a law in the books that makes our border policies permanent. Because right now, everything we have is through executive order, which means it only takes one more bad president to go in there and revoke everything that President Trump has put and give us a mass chaos, plus more that President Biden gave us. So I measure success and ensuring that we have a law in the book within a year that codifies, secures, and makes permanent President Trump's border policies, which in turn makes sure that we have investments in high-tech equipment. I was talking to the president of the Border Patrol Council and says, we have got to invest in drone protection, right? Long gone are the days that we have to just worry about foot traffic over our border. We've got to have drone protection. We have to allocate resources to the men and women in uniform who every day are putting their lives on the line at the border. We have to end catch and release, and we have to defund states that have this sanctuary city law that actually makes local government and local law enforcement not work with the National Border Patrol Council. This is not about race. Listen, mainstream media wants to make this about race. This is about national security. For every mom, for every dad, for every young person, you need to hear this. 300 people that were on the U.S. terrorist watch list are in the country today that we know of. So in order for us to have a protect the homeland mentality, we have got to make sure that local and state law enforcement are cooperating with federal law enforcement to keep every single one of us safe in our country.
So District 19 is one of the most important agricultural districts in the country. You recently said the Farm Bill needs to be revolutionized and that policies need to benefit small ranchers and farmers. What's wrong with the Farm Bill right now?
So the Farm Bill, we haven't had a Farm Bill. And I think right now what we have is waiting on the Senate to get in line with what the House presented. I think we have until September 30th for them to agree with what the House put it within the Farm Bill. And I have traveled every single county in our district, majority rural. And so I've spoken to a lot of small farmers and ranchers. And what their frustration is with the Farm Bill is that 3/4 of the Farm Bill has nothing to do with farming. 3/4 of the Farm Bill has actually high emphasis on the SNAP program. What does a welfare program that is necessary in a lot of cases have to do with our farmers and ranchers? I believe the SNAP program needs to be its own independent bill. I think that we need to reshape how we do that as well. And our farmers and ranchers need its own standalone bill that actually benefits them. And also, if you look at my opponent, who claims to be one of the architects of the Farm Bill, this should scare every single person. Because of the Farm Bill, as it stood when my opponent was the architect of it, over 200,000 small farmers and ranchers have gone out of business over the past 6 years. And on debate stage, not too long ago, I said that stat. And you know what my opponent said? My opponent said 200,000 is really not that big of a number in the grand scheme of things. I think one small farm and ranch that goes out of business is one too many. And all this investment of data centers coming into our region and buying out our small farmers and ranchers, I think we need to take a heavy look at that. We don't have any more land than what we have today, and we need to protect what we do. So revolutionize our Farm Bill as a standalone Farm Bill and let our SNAP program be its SNAP program, but also provide incentives for our small farmers and ranchers to be able to feel like they can pass on their legacy to the next generation. The fact that if you are someone wanting to go into the farming and ranching industry, it's almost nearly impossible today, should concern everyone. Also, if you are a young farmer wanting to take over your family farm, the fact that most of them feel like they can't do that also should concern people. So I think that's my priority is standing up for small farmers and ranchers, because that's not an option for me. The very reason I get to say that I'm an American is because my grandparents were farm workers. It's something that's very close to heart.
So we can't speak about West Texas agriculture without discussing water, right?
Yeah.
Water is very critical to this region, but water levels have declined over time, and farmers are under pressure from drought, cost, and regulation. And as we speak, there's literally an anti-data center protest going on.
Yeah.
I chose to do this interview with you, then go over
there.
Yeah. But Congress doesn't control every local groundwater decision, but it does control research, conservation programs, and infrastructure, disaster aid, and parts of the farm policy. What can you do at a federal level to protect West Texas water without attacking private property rights?
Well, private property rights are super important, and I believe that this is more of a state issue with some conversation that needs to be had on the federal side. And I want to break this down into two parts. Number one, right now, our local lawmakers, our state lawmakers are doing a really good job of pushing policies that invest in resources and the infrastructure to conserve the water that we do have. And let's be honest, none of us can campaign on promising to make it rain. None of us can, right? But what we can do is provide incentives and investments into secure what we do have. So number one, on the federal side, I think anything that the state allocates for research, for innovation, for protection of our water supply, there is a good opportunity to have the federal government match that type of investment, right? Which is why on day one that we did this campaign, I made it a point to go and speak to our state lawmakers. That was Senator Kevin Sparks, Senator Charles Perry. They have a really good water plan that I think that there can be some federal conversation to match what they are doing on the state side to the federal side. So that's on the policy side. But I also think that every single person that is in West Texas that is hearing about these AI data centers that are kind of taking up our water supply has the right to be concerned. Make no mistake, I think West Texas should beat China and the AI race. Think about it. The AI conversation and the war on AI, it's going to go somewhere. And if it's going to go somewhere, I'd rather it be here in West Texas where we as West Texans can shape that conversation, not China. However, there is a lot of different super PACs and special interest groups that are coming into the investments of West Texas. And what should scare everyone is that my opponent, to the tune of $700,000, has accepted special interest super PAC money from an unregulated AI super PAC that wants to come into West Texas and go against the very policies that our local and state lawmakers are saying to preserve water rights. Meaning that if my opponent would win, everything he's saying about water rights gets sidelined and he has to answer to the $700,000 worth of favors that the super PAC is providing for him, which is unregulated AI investments. So if you're a farmer concerned about your water supply, you're sidelined. If you are in Haskell County that is concerned of all the people that are coming into your community, that was promised to be employment for your community, but not a single person has been employed, that should concern you as well. If you're someone from Abilene that is struggling because of the housing market, that should concern you. And if you're here in Lubbock County, concerned about our electric and our water supply, that should concern you as well. The war and the race to AI is a good one, and it should be partnered with our community. We shouldn't be buried or burdened by it.
Okay, so speaking about AI, because you already hit that a little bit, if a major company wanted to build a massive data center right here in Lubbock or anywhere in this district, what conditions should be a non-negotiable before leaders just automatically say yes?
One, first of all, I think we shouldn't be having this conversation until we understand what we're doing with our water supply. Let's do that first. Let's get a good, solid policy foundation on what we're going to do to preserve the water that we do barely even have here today. Secondly, once we get that done, I think we need to have a couple things. There's a lot of, I've spoken to a lot of mayors around our community that were, 5-10 years ago, promised from these big data centers that they were going to come in and they were going to invest, X number of jobs that were going to come to the community. Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want jobs and investments coming into your community? There is one county right now that were promised an X amount of jobs for the community. Today, not a single one of them has been employed by the people of their county, but people coming in from California, New York, and Florida, mostly on H-1B visas. That changes the very fabric and the very culture of West Texas. So when a data center comes in, I think a percentage of that has to be mandatory employed by the community, right? By people who actually live here. Because what we're actually going to end up doing is importing people that don't believe in West Texas values, don't understand Texas culture, and it's going to change the very way we live out here in West Texas. I think that's critical.
So a lot of candidates campaign hard in Lubbock, Abilene, and the bigger stops, but District 19 includes a lot of smaller communities that often feel forgotten as well. So if you win, how will somebody in Plainview, Snyder, Levelland, Big Spring, Brownfield, or any rural county still know they matter after the election's over?
Yeah, look, I think out of sight, out of mind, right? And that pertains a lot to politics. On day one, when we announced this campaign here in Lubbock, the next thing I did was I got into our truck and we drove all the way to Big Spring. And then we drove to Andrews. And then we drove to Plainview. And then we drove to Levelland. And then we went to Abilene and then Throckmorton. And I've learned that there is a desperate need for people to, how can you legislate in DC if you don't know what's going on the ground? Which is why I made a commitment to ensure that we were going to open up a congressional district office right outside of Big Spring and into Andrews. Because if you don't know what your community is saying, you don't know how to fight for them. I think that's one step that we can do, is provide presence in areas where you are, where you need to be legislating from. Also, I don't love the idea of getting to DC and your office being made up of people that are just recycled on Capitol Hill. I mean, when someone from West Texas calls their member of Congress in Washington, they expect to hear from someone that's actually from West Texas. And I get it. I think that you need to have people from DC that manage your offices to ensure that you are effectively getting things done. But on mostly, I think that the people from West Texas should be applying for those jobs and should be taking those jobs. When West Texans are helping West Texans, things get done just a little better. Not just some recycled staffers from DC that come from different states that really don't know our very fabric of our culture. So I think it's one way to ease some of that communication with our community.
So one of the knocks on the candidate that's actually leaving office is that we never seen him, and then it was always hard to get in contact with him. Mm-hmm. So how often should voters expect to see you in the district and not just on TV or social media?
Listen, as a surrogate to President Trump's campaign, when he announced his reelection, I signed up and I became a surrogate, and I campaigned with him in 17 different counties. Being in tune to the community, it's not just something that I say, it's something that I have done. Every year my organization does an event here in West Texas, and we highlight the leadership of the community. I think that's a testament to the people that I have held accountable in my life, or that have held me accountable in my life. My opponent has relied on out-of-state consultants to run his campaign. Who's running my campaign?
Who?
The people of West Texas. I have the past president of the Lubbock Area Republican Women as the chair of my Women for Abraham Coalition. I have the president of the Turning Point chapter of Texas Tech, one of the fastest growing chapters of the Turning Point League here in Texas, as a chair of my Students for Abraham Coalition. I have the leadership of Project Destiny, one of the most effective grassroots organizations for faith-based causes, chairing my Believers with Abraham Coalition. The people of West Texas have gotten me this far, and the people of West Texas are the people I'm accountable to. So, when the people who have gotten you across the finish line are the ones that are telling you how to vote, how to dictate your life, how to hold you accountable, I think you have a good source of accountability. So for me, I'm never going to forget the people that got me across the finish line. My opponent, on the other hand, relies on people from California and DC. So if he were to win, I would expect him to never be back in West Texas again.
So you've criticized Tom Sell and called him a rhino. He's argued that you're attacking him because that's your only path. I asked somebody a question to ask you, and the one question they told me to ask is, do you live with your mother?
No. You were at the precinct convention, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So precinct conventions is decided on where you guys live, where people live. I was in one precinct, and you know where my mother was at? In a very different precinct. These are our addresses on record, meaning I cannot lie of where I live. And for everyone that's a precinct chair, everyone that was in that convention, everyone saw my mom was in a different precinct, and I was at a different precinct. I paid property rights. I've lived, in fact, when I came back from Abilene to Lubbock, I decided to take over the home, our childhood home. And my parents moved away to a different location, and I'm proud to have be paying the house that I was raised in. That's something that I'm proud of. But yes, I live on my own, pay my own property taxes, and I do not live with my parents. Sorry if my opponent, who maybe have been following me for a while, and maybe has his campaign staffers following me for a while, has seen me a lot in my parents' home. I'm Hispanic, very family oriented. There's not a Sunday I don't spend there's not a day I probably don't spend at my parents' home, just simply because I have to drop my dog off while I'm out campaigning the rest of the day.
All right, so finish this sentence. If I'm elected to Congress and fail to blank, voters should hold me accountable.
Show up. Simple. Show up.
Okay, so this is your final pitch for voters who like your values but still wonder whether you're ready for Congress. What do you say to them?
I say this is about changing how we do politics in West Texas. I've heard people are tired of politics being so establishment based. And right now, I made a commitment to my community. People oftentimes say, DC has gotten so corrupt. How are we going to change it when people get there? And I think that change happens even before you become a sitting member of Congress. Change happens how you run your campaign, right? I have seen in my limited time in DC as a partner to the White House, from the outside looking in, I have seen when there's great young talent on the ground and they fight for principles that are good and that are just. And they effectively run a good campaign. And then these special interest PACs and groups from DC, they spot really good talent. And then they knock on their door and say, we like what you're doing. We like your fight. We're going to give you $1 million, $2 million, $3 million to run your race. And that money gets them across the finish line. And then when they get to DC, These young fighters, they want to do good. But guess who comes knocking on their door? All those special interest groups, and say, hey, remember those $1 million that we gave you? Everything that you fought for your community, sideline them, because now you owe us $1 million worth of favors. You're going to vote the way we want you to vote. You're going to speak the way we want you to speak. You're going to file legislation the way we want you to file. So corruption in DC actually stops the way you campaign. And on day one of this campaign, we promised to the people of West Texas, not a penny of special interest groups or corporate lobbying PACs were going to be accepted in this campaign. Everything that we have raised has been from individual contributions of individual people from West Texas and from the state of Texas. My opponent, to the tune of $2 million, has accepted special interest corporate lobbying PAC money from K Street in DC. Meaning on day one, if he were to get there, all the things that we care about would be sidelined, and he'd have to answer to those $1 million worth of favors. So those that are still not convinced, I would say change happens from the outside. And we have one shot in this election to send an outsider to change the very way we do things from the inside.
And for any voter who's undecided between you and Tom Sell, or anyone who says the 806er shows way too much favoritism to you, what is the clearest difference between the two of you?
If anyone says that you showed clear favoritism, I would say, I don't know, you made it a little different. You do your vetting, my friend. If they were to see our conversations, our face-to-face conversation, you ask the tough questions and you want to see tangible evidence of the things that you have questions about. So I would say that they don't know you and they don't know me. But the clearest difference, born and raised, again, right here in Lubbock, Texas, a graduate of Abilene Christian University, I have always stood for the fight here in West Texas. We have had some serious fights in our community. There was an ordinance that once was on the ballot that would protect unborn life. I was the only candidate that went out and knocked on the doors, made the calls, drove people to the polls to ensure that our community would safeguard unborn life. There was an ordinance that would decriminalize marijuana on the ballot. I knew that was a floodgate of making sure that drugs were going to flood our streets. Only one of us actually stood, knocked on the doors, made the calls, drove people to the polls. I was 2 days out of a foot fracture in a boot, knocking on the doors to ensure that we were going to drive people to the polls and ensure that we were going to win that race. And I did that not because I wanted to run for office one day. Believe me, I didn't think that this opportunity would ever come. I did that because I love West Texas and I want to safeguard the values that we hold dear. On the other hand, my opponent, 30 years in DC, $1 million property on 19th Street, $1 million property in DC. He has not been in the fight in West Texas. So this race comes down to who has been in the fight, and only one of us has been. And I hope that I can count on your support.
So Abraham, thank you for joining us. To everyone watching, Election Day is next week, and by the time this airs, it will be tomorrow, actually. Voters deserve more than slogans, mailers, and social media fights. They deserve real answers. Our job is not to tell you who to vote for. Our job is to ask the questions and give you the conversations and let you decide. So we hope you've done that. We ask you to take time to study both of these candidates, compare their answers, and make informed decisions. We want to thank you, and thank you again for sitting down with us, because the other candidate chose not to when he really could. So to the people watching, thank you for watching. Thank you for making this the 806er, and make your choice.
Thank you all. Go out and vote.
Great interview.
Thank you.